John Stanton, editor of Gambit, and I'm joined today by Senator Royce Duplessis, who, of course, is running for mayor of our lovely city. Senator, thank you very much for coming to sit down with us.
Thank you for having me.
Let's just start it off with the standard, give me the elevator pitch for why you should be mayor.
Well, we're in the Big Easy. We're known as a city that's the Big Easy, but living in New Orleans isn't so easy. So we're Big Easy in name, but we're not the Big Easy in experience. And I believe I have the right qualifications, and I believe I have the right ingredients, both in terms of my professional experience in policy making, all the experiences I've had throughout my life. I say that I'm true New Orleans, real New Orleans. And I believe I have the temperament and the leadership style to help bring people together to get us moving in the right direction. Because right now, it's not that easy living in New Orleans.
No, it's not. And you know, it does seem that there's a, everything kind of feels like it's broken right now.
Yeah.
And kind of stopped. Looking at like your first, say, 100 days.
Yes.
What are things when you're mayor that you can do to give people a sense of like normalcy, I guess, again, and hope, and that things are actually going to start working? What are some concrete things people could look forward to?
They have to see things and they have to feel things. So your question is literally directly tied to what I plan to do in my first 100 days. 20 projects across the 5 city council districts that are either stalled or no real movement on infrastructure projects, be it streets, sewage and water board projects. We're going to see actual tangible movement. We're going to get true coordination amongst the different department heads, from sewage and water board to public works, even Cox, Entergy. There's going to be a coordinating cabinet, and we're going to get in there, and people are actually going to start to see progress on their block, real progress on their block. And you're going to see a much different interface on the city's website. So right now, John, if you report something on your block, something that's broken, it'll show up in the public-facing dashboard, but all it will say is pending, which is fine, and that's legit. But the problem with that is what it doesn't say is that this is how long the project should take. This is how many days over time it's taken, right? So we got to put some real accountability in there, and the way we put accountability in there is to put performance metrics and real benchmarks. So people will actually see real movement within my first 100 days, 100 projects within 100 days.
You know, one of the things I think that people feel like is connected to that is that people used to say in New Orleans that, like, you got a job at the city, you kind of had it made. It was a good job, it was a well-paying job, you knew you were going to have it. Today, you talk to folks who work at DPW, like I talk to my neighbors, and like they go to work and they feel like their job sucks. They don't, like, it feels like management is kind of messed up, but they're also like, there ain't really anybody there anymore. There's like 5 of us doing the job of 100 people. And, you know, there's been some talk about trying to return some of these jobs away back into the public sector, away from contractors. Where do you stand on that?
I think we have to do both. I think we should explore what I call a hybrid model. So a lot of this work ended up getting contracted out post-Katrina, but even with all of those contracts, we still haven't spent down the $2 billion that we got after Katrina. So some people are talking about project management. Well, we've done the project management route, and you know what we saw with project management? We didn't have people on the inside to truly hold them accountable. So you saw instances where we were spending $40, $50 million with no actual progress. What I want to do is go out and recruit and get people to believe in City Hall again, to believe in the city again, so we can get outside expertise to come in to work to help beef up public works. We probably won't be able to hire 100 people within the first year, but we can get up to 10. And that's going to also take working with civil service, dealing with hiring freezes, dealing with some of the log jams around hiring. But we have to be reasonable and work towards getting people back into City Hall. And one of the ways we have to absolutely do that is pay people better. People ain't going to work there if you're not paying them a decent salary. But the overall culture and the tone at City Hall right now, I think, is one where people don't feel excited about going into work. And this new election, this administration will give people a reason to believe again.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about is, and you touched a little bit on it, you know, the tone at City Hall obviously has been kind of bad. Yeah. That's not a shocker, a surprise to anybody. And you've talked quite a bit about this. To play a little bit of devil's advocate,
yes.
and why is it bad? Why would it be bad for the city council to push back on the mayor, to demand that she do things when they feel like she's not engaged in the city, let's say, or over the school board funding fight, for instance? Why do you see that as a problem, that relationship?
I don't see accountability as a problem. I believe that it's necessary. I believe that we have 3 branches of government for a reason. So the council can hold the mayor accountable no matter who's in office. But I do think that there comes a point where when you look up and you see all of these different fights, we can single out the school board issue. That's one issue. But that wasn't the only issue, or you have this multitude of issues that are ending up in the courts. And at some point, I do believe that leadership has to say, if you know how a person's going to respond, is it better for me to find a way to see how we can de-escalate and in order to get something done, or do I have to continue to one-up the other person? And I felt like that's kind of the direction that we ended up going. So there's a way to hold people accountable, but as a leader, I think you also have to take a step back and say, if you know how a person's going to respond, and you know it's not going to be in the best interest, how do you most effectively get things done without it always ending up in the courts? And I think I want to be clear. A lot of what I've said in my criticism is not one directional. It's not just placing it on the council. So your question sort of premises, though, I'm only blaming the city council in this. When I've been critical, it's been about both branches, both sides of the second floor. All right. So yeah.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, because I do think it gets into people's heads, and it does sometimes sound like from the public perspective, at least, that it is both sides for sure.
Yeah.
And but then I was like, well, is that a bad thing, right? And like,
yeah, no, I think that we were not sent there to just like hold hands, right? And sing kumbaya. We were sent there to serve the people. But I work in a pretty hostile climate, and I'm usually oftentimes in the super minority when it comes to certain issues. But at the end of the day, we still have to figure out a way to work with people, even in the toughest of atmospheres. So when I look at what's happening at the local level, we all agree on most of these issues. I mean, we all agree on most of these issues. Everybody's the same political party. We all want trash picked up. We all want clean, safe streets. We all want well-lit streets. We want better jobs in our city. We want a city where we're celebrating the culture and we're proud to live here. We all want those things. So what's getting in the way? Is it personalities? Is it political agendas? I think it's probably the latter.
Well, actually, so you and I've talked about a little bit about this just now off camera, but why make the transition, right? Why decide to go from the state senate, where you've got a very successful career and you've built a name for yourself, a reputation? Like, what's the draw?
I believe the urgency. It's just the urgency that we have right now. So some have described the city as a dumpster fire, or City Hall specifically as a dumpster fire, and I know that we have some issues in our city. We are dealing with a lot of division and chaos because of the issues that have taken place at City Hall. So as I've said before, if you've been at City Hall, were you trying to put out the flames at City during the dumpster fire? Were you fanning them, or what was going on? And I looked at the race. I mean, a lot of time went by. It was from January to June. I was focused on my work in Baton Rouge. We have an insurance crisis we're trying to address. People in the community, everyday residents, not political folks, but everyday people would speak to me. Lady in the grocery store, at the church, or at the senior center, asked me to reconsider. They wanted another option. And I quite honestly, I believe they deserved another option. So when I looked at my combination of experience, both in public service, but also just throughout the course of my life, I believe that the time was now for me to offer myself to give something other than what was being offered from a leadership perspective. And I think that if we're going to call the city a dumpster fire, maybe we need somebody from the outside who hasn't been part of it. And just because of the fact that I think I can make more of an impact being one of one as opposed to one of 144. And I love my service in the legislature. I want to be clear about that. But the other conversation we were having was just about how you made your journalistic journey to reporting more locally, and you see the impact that has from when you were working up on the Hill. I see the same thing here. This is where I got my start. I got my start at City Hall 20 years ago, and I know right now people are feeling the pain, and I want to help address some of that pain to make New Orleans an easier place to live.
What are some things that, as mayor, you think you could do to successfully bring more development and more economic opportunity for areas, particularly like the East and also the West Bank? I mean, the fact that the Amazon same-day center is in Slidell is kind of crazy.
You've been listening to me give speeches, because here's the deal, John. So I literally everywhere I go, that's what I say. So I'm going to early today, I was at my high school, and I tell this story. People are probably sick of hearing me tell it, but in the 10th grade, I was playing basketball. I had an older brother who was a superior basketball player, and I always tried to follow in his footsteps. But I didn't see it, at the time, but my coach saw something. He pulled me aside at the end of my 10th grade year, and I was thinking we were about to talk about next season. He put his hand on my shoulder and looked me in the eye. He said, "Have you ever thought about speech and debate?" Right? And so what I took from that was that we got to play up our strengths, okay? And that was a life-changing moment for me. So as a city, look, we are a port city. And the port has had a lot of issues with the way that it has conducted with local community. But the expansion project presents an opportunity, the container terminal project presents an opportunity for New Orleans East in particular. I am sick and tired of seeing Amazon distribution plants go up in St. Tammany and in Elmwood. Another one just went up over there. That's prime real estate right there in New Orleans East. Manufacturing, distribution, logistics, warehousing opportunities. And I believe all of that can happen as a result of this port project that's underway, a $2 billion investment. And we just need to be coordinated and focused about making sure that the resources go to New Orleans East. So we have to play up our strengths. Also, Charity Hospital, still sitting vacant. So healthcare, the bio district is a huge opportunity for us, not just to grow downtown, but to grow good paying jobs in healthcare and in biotech, bioengineering. So I want to focus on playing up our strengths. And from there, we can attract and we can signal to the business community, we're serious. We need better jobs outside of just tourism and hospitality.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and that's, so you mentioned tech and the port. Are there other like sectors or things that you think we could be doing?
Aerospace is something we should keep on the radar. You see what's happening in Huntsville. And a lot of that investment is even going to Mississippi. So why can't we get that in New Orleans or in the region at least? So aerospace is another area we have NASA, meat shoot facility right there in New Orleans East. We have a lot of strengths if we just play them up, if we lean into them, if we're focused.
One thing that like a lot of folks talk about is that they feel like there's oftentimes a disconnect in how the law sort of writ large gets enforced, right? And they look at something like Plaza Tower, which has been sitting there forever, and like it's just allowed to be like a dangerous eyesore and a bad thing in our city, right? But then, then you're a kid playing buckets on the street. Somebody's gonna come around and hassle you on that. And people feel like there's a disconnect, that if you're wealthy and you're doing something that's messed up, you kind of just get away with it, right? Yeah. Like, how do you strike a balance, I guess, between, because those are both quality of life issues, right? Where's the balance for you?
Yeah, so that has historically been the case in this country, is that, wealth and status can afford you more protections and relief than, unfortunately, the kid playing the buckets on the street. This is how I look at that. So every day I walk out of my house, I live in Central City. I see the Plaza Tower with the net that's been wrapped around it for 2 years or more now. It's unacceptable. Now I know that there's litigation underway, and we've tried to do some things. Well, I know the city council's tried to take some action. The administration at the state level, there's even been legislation to be more punitive around property owners who aren't doing what they're supposed to do. But then there's litigation going on with that stood in the way. I'm going to talk specifically about the kid that's playing buckets. I'm not just going to go and pick up that kid and get him off the street. That's not how we deal with that problem. We have to ask the question why. So when I'm dealing with my colleagues up in Baton Rouge and they just want to build more jails for our young people and basically that's their way of dealing with them, I'm saying we're not going to just do that. We're going to ask the question why. What is this child lacking that led him or her to playing buckets on the street? So there's two things that we can do. We can do enforcement because we have to do enforcement, but we also have to address the underlying issues. That's why I'm focused on things like early childhood education. I'm focused on things like literacy by the age of 8, making sure kids get the investment. I'm not just here to do the enforcement, but I want to do the investment, and that will lessen the enforcement on the vulnerable community so we can have more of a balanced approach to how we govern. But we absolutely have to hold bad property owners accountable. They got to get brought into City Hall. We have to file litigation. We have to hold them accountable because that's a nuisance and a public safety issue. So again, I'm never going to just address the issue as one-sided and saying, look, we just got to go clean up Bourbon Street. We got to clean up downtown. No, we clean it up, but the way that we do it, same thing with homelessness. We have to diagnose the problem. We're not just going to go yank people off the streets and say, find somewhere else to do it. This is New Orleans. So we're going to lead with compassion and understanding because we're an inclusive city. And there is a way. So that's my style of leadership. And we're not just going to pull babies out the river. We're going to say, stop. Let's see why they're getting in the river to begin with.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of the city being inclusive, right now we are facing two administrations above us that are hostile to us.
Yeah.
The Landry administration and the Trump administration, both pretty much explicitly kind of based on race. And people are, I think, concerned about two things. One is obviously this threat of having the military, but also a broader federal, the ATF and FBI like they've been doing in D.C. coming into the city. Where do you stand on that?
So I've made several statements on that. I made a statement. I think I did a video when the announcements were first made around cities like Baltimore, talking about cities like Chicago and others throughout the city. And I made it very clear. I think this was back in late August. I said, don't be surprised if New Orleans ends up on that list. And sure enough, about a week later, New Orleans ends up in the conversation. So we know what time it is. You just look at the cities, look at who's leading these cities, and we see the political theater that's going on. My problem with that is, number one, New Orleans, we're a home rule charter city. We're a city of self-determination. And we've been dealing with that historically, even dealing with Baton Rouge. But the idea, the concept of having federal troops patrolling our neighborhoods, that's just not something that I can stand for or accept. We will accept any resources to invest in New Orleans Recreation Department, to invest in paying teachers better salaries, to invest in mental health, to invest in all the things that will stop crime from happening on the front end. But having National Guard troops who are not trained to police our neighborhoods that's making things more harmful, in my opinion. So we don't want that. We want people to feel safe in their neighborhoods, and people don't feel safe in their neighborhoods by having National Guardsmen patrolling. Those National Guards people need to be ready to respond to hurricanes when they happen, not police in neighborhoods, which they're not trained to do that.
What about something like the real-time like surveillance?
Yeah, so on that, so I am a proponent of technology, crime cameras and the like, and I think we have the data to show that it's been helpful. I have real concerns about the live facial recognition technology because of the data and the studies are saying, number one, we haven't really seen this stuff implemented anywhere, so it's experimental, number one. But secondly, and more importantly, is the disproportionate impact of constitutional rights violations that it will have on Black and brown people. Got real concerns with that, so I'm opposed to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
You mentioned taking help and wanting help for expanding programs that fight the problems at the root, right?
Correct.
And I mentioned this to OT when we did this with him. I grew up in D.C. and one of the programs that I saw as a kid that worked enormously well and saved a lot of my friends' lives was Marion Barry's Summer Jobs program.
That's right.
Right, and he saved thousands of kids' lives, right?
Yep.
And we have programs like that here. But I'm wondering, would you expand those? Would you, also, I guess I can't believe I have to actually ask you this, but would you make sure that they would get paid?
Thank you. So earlier today, we were at the high school, and for young people, we need three things. We need education, we need quality recreation, and we need job opportunities for our young people. So when I was 15, I was a bricklayer's assistant. I jumped on the truck with him one summer. I bust tables at Mandina's. I was always trying to get some extra dollars in my pocket. We can't ask young people to come join our programs and work if we're not going to pay them on time. So my vision and my plan is, before I look to grow the program, we have to first make sure that it's operating and functioning properly, so kids get paid on time, so their parents aren't calling City Hall saying, "Why haven't you paid my child?" And we have we got to just get these kids paid. From there, yes, I would absolutely look to grow it, because that's what our children need and deserve. And Mayor Barry was very successful with that, with having young people in D.C. employed. That's what we need to be. If we want to stop crime, let's give kids a job. So, but we have to also get them paid.
Right. Yeah.
So that's the issue.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a thing with all of this, honestly, that comes up a lot. People look at New Orleans and people talk about it like it's this crazy violent place. Lots of poverty, everything's all messed up. And while those of us that live here, we're like, everything's kind of messed up.
Yeah.
At the same time, it's not as dangerous as people think it is.
Right.
But it keeps people, I feel like, who might want to move here, or I think more importantly, the diaspora that has left since Katrina from coming home.
Yeah.
How do you, as mayor, make the case to our brothers and sisters that have left to get them to come back and to rejoin the community again?
The same way I do every day up there in Baton Rouge. I mean, they talk so bad about us, but at the same time, they want to extract everything out of us. So I'm glad you asked me that question, because I'll go to your earlier question too about the National Guard and how dangerous it is, because there are multiple reasons why that's dangerous. But just think about from an economic standpoint, if Mr. President or Mr. Governor, you're telling the world that we need National Guard troops here in the city because we're so violent, despite the fact that crime is down. Crime is actually down. You're telling everyone we're unsafe. So what's that going to do to our economy? People are going to think twice about coming to tour, have a trip here. And residents that we want to move to the city are going to say, why would I move to a city where there's the National Guard? So a lot of this is about perception. And places like New Orleans East, I live in Central City. And let's use, for example, on Tulane Avenue, they just got a Trader Joe's. I celebrate that, and that's awesome. Why can't Trader Joe's go in New Orleans East? Because I'm sure there are pockets of New Orleans East. The majority of New Orleans East, if you look at crime statistics, they're probably lower than that section of Tulane Avenue where that Trader Joe's just went. It's perception. It's how we talk about things. So when people ask me about my plan for New Orleans East, not only is it to grow those jobs we talked about earlier, but the way that I'm going to talk about New Orleans East won't just be reminiscent of New Orleans East that I experienced as a child, going to the Kenilworth Mall or going to the Plaza. New Orleans East was a place you lit up when you used to go out there. I mean, New Orleans East was the place to be. And the way we talk about it is the same way we have to talk about New Orleans with respect to public safety. We have to acknowledge crime. We have to deal with it, but we have to be front and focused. I want New Orleans to be the world's leader in prevention and intervention. We can do it. We have everything it takes, and I won't let them label us as just being like the Wild Wild West. I mean, they talk about us like, I can't go to New Orleans because something bad's going to happen. Look, bad things do happen, and I'm not here to minimize any of that. But we also have to be honest about the data and honest about the statistics, and say we know the ways to fix it. Who best knows how to fix the problems, and the people who live closest to the problems. And again, it starts on the front end. Certainly, New Orleans Police Department needs to be resourced. They have to be properly resourced and invested in, because we want good men and women to join the ranks, have good quality pay so they can do a good quality job. And look, I live across the street from the 6th District Police Station. I couldn't tell you the number of times they say that their air conditioning is out in hot July, right? So, but the dealing with the perception and lining that up with reality is a big role that the mayor plays in honoring victims who've been victimized, censoring their pain, and making sure that there are no future victims, but also understanding and getting to the root causes of why people go out and do the things that they do is how I will lead.
So one of the things that's happening right now, honestly, is that tourism is still our number one industry in the city, for good or ill. Right. But we're seeing drops. Yeah. A lot of that is international tourism is way down in the United States in general. And I think like we've been talking about with perception of the city, is there a role for the mayor and the government to play in a time like this when culture bearers who are never really making enough money, frankly, to begin with, to get them whole and to make sure that they're not just barely making ends meet, but actually so they can be comfortable and that they can continue to do their art, their music, whatever they're doing in the city, comfortably.
Yeah, so for sure. So I will absolutely keep the Mayor's Office of Cultural Economy in place and continue to invest in it and continue to work to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our culture bearers. I tell the story of how, my grandfather, he was a member of the Treme Square Deal original second line group. He had dementia, and he may not recognize you or your name, but he remembered how the second line. My uncle Townsley was a member of the Black Men of Labor. My wife's grandfather was Lionel Furbos. He played the trumpet till he was 103 years old. What I learned is that the mayor has an incredible role in protecting our culture bearers, not just through the Office of Cultural Economy, but being a convener, being a convener with organizations like the Ella Project, being a convener with organizations like Musicians Village, who provide resources to our culture bearers, whether it be education, legal services for intellectual property, which is a huge one, healthcare, and these organizations do a phenomenal job in providing resources and support. And even when it comes down to housing, we can develop programs, and we have seen programs like the art lofts and all of the tax incentives that were created many, many years ago to create incentives for our culture bearers and the people who truly make New Orleans what it is. When I was part of the New Orleans City Council staff back in 2006, going into 2007, the councilman who I worked for, Councilman James Carter, we stood up one of the first ordinances to have a council, a coordinating council for the Mardi Gras Indians, because they felt they were under attack. And it was good work that we did 20 years ago. I was proud to be a part of that. So the mayor will certainly play a huge role, but the key is first understanding who is the culture, right? How do we define the culture? And I'm an extension of that. That's why, I did an ad. People had some issue with it when we used the term "he's one of us." Like, some people with twisted motivations wanted to try to say I was making it racial. It had nothing to do with race. It had everything to do with the fact that I am a part of this culture. I'm a part of New Orleans. And with that comes a level of accountability. So that's why I say those things. But I think the mayor plays a huge role with convening all of the stakeholders around lifting up the culture to making sure we can create a true cultural economy. We've seen it happen in Nashville. We can do it in New Orleans.
Kind of related to that, I guess, is, you look at the second lines and or folks like Under the Bridge, and we've seen a lot of enforcement against people selling cold drinks, selling booze or selling food. And, New Orleans has always had like a gray economy, and oftentimes the city council, I think for noble reasons, has said, well, what we need to do is we need to find ways to regulate it. And those don't seem to have worked very well, really. Do you think there is a way to regulate it, or do you think this is more of a situation where it's convening people together to get them to figure it out?
Yeah. So what I've done throughout my journey is I've just tried to listen. I think a big challenge we face, John, is just education and access to get people the resources they need to do it properly, to get the proper licensing, to get the proper permitting. So we can't just crack down without showing people the way to do it the right way. Because if you're operating your business legally, you're doing it the right way, but somebody comes and sets up shop right in front of you, they're not doing it the right way. We can't do that. So we want to show people a pathway, whether let's say you're a chef and you just want to prepare food and be able to sell it to people who are on the second line. We need to make sure that City Hall is properly resourcing people with education and access to know how they can do it legally. And there have been steps in doing that. A lot of people leading the way to make sure that we have those open doors and those open pathways, but we just have to do a better job of actually showing up to people, as has been said, meeting them where they are and providing those opportunities. So it's a balance. It's just a constant balance. Yeah.
I guess the last question I have for you, honestly, is, the Super Bowl came to town, and there was a lot of stuff that was done in a very particular part of town.
Yeah.
But even in that part of town, when I talked with small business owners in the quarter and the CBD, they felt like they got left out.
Yep.
And you look at the bars on Bourbon Street, they got bought out. They brought in musicians from out of town to play New Orleans music for people that were coming to New Orleans for the Super Bowl, which was insane, right?
Yeah.
Like, there were musicians that got put out of jobs for a week.
Right.
When you're mayor and the NFL comes and says, well, do you want to bid on having the Super Bowl? How do you figure out to fight somebody that is as big and sort of aggressive as them to make sure that we don't have another a repeat of that where everybody benefits from it?
Right. So I want to make sure I'm clear when I say we would always rather have the Super Bowl than not have the Super Bowl. But with that said, we recognize that the benefits of the Super Bowl are not felt by the people who live here in a way that they should. Too often, New Orleanians feel like they're secondary to tourists, and we have to reverse that. So I will sit down with NFL and all major events, not just NFL, Essence, so many others that come to town where every year we have seemingly like a breakdown where our true business owners and culture bearers And I think, look, Essence over the years have done a good job. I even believe that the Super Bowl did a good job of lifting up our culture bearers.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a big deal. It was great. Like Queen Taj and the role that she played and all of that. I mean, that was huge. But with that said, we heard of all the other stories like you just described, where people offer great businesses, have a true stake in the city and felt no benefit. We need to work with organizations like New Orleans and Company and other tourism agencies to make sure that we're promoting off the beaten path. You got to get outside of just the traditional places inside of New Orleans and know that there's more to the story. And we have to just be more vocal about it when we're negotiating these contracts, that it won't just be within the same traditional boundaries, but we want to push people outside of those areas so that nobody should be losing work. That's for certain. We want to always lift up New Orleanians so that they're the ones who benefit. I mean, musicians being out of work for a week that's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
You know, but so we just have to, again, go back to finding that balance and be a voice for the true New Orleans. Okay. Yeah.
Well, look, I really appreciate you coming in.
Thank you,
very
John.
much.
I
It's
appreciate
really
the
great.
invitation. Yeah,
and
thank you.
Good luck on the campaign.
Thank you, man. Appreciate you. Thank you so much.